Good morning, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. We got a special little episode here today. So some of our off the beaten path episodes that don't involve like new product reviews and top 10 songs or best to worst albums or classic album or all that kind of stuff generally are kind of like influenced and instigated by conversations that I have with people at at concerts, at the gym, or online, wherever. And a lot of times I'll be involved in these musical conversations like, you know what, that'll make a pretty interesting topic for a show here on the YouTube channel. So today's is no different. So today's topic of conversation is all about those like well-known singers. And, again, we're talking about, hard rock, metal, prog singers, right? Because that's what we cover here on this channel. So, and those singers, those notable singers who have worked with some of the best guitar players out there. Who are those singers? Who are some of those guitar players, right? And we're not talking about, a singer who's worked with like 1, 2, or 3 guitar players. I'm talking about the ones that have worked with a significant amount of guitar players. Very, very notable, I might add. So I'm going to go through these. And again, if you're someone who has maybe just stumbled upon this video, have no history with our channel, and you're like, oh my God, all he's talking about is like metal and hard rock singers and prog singers, and what about this guy and what about that guy? This is what we cover on this channel. All right, so if you've come here and you're looking for like kind of, punk and new wave and pop and folk rock and all that kind of stuff, it's not what we do here, right? So put your seatbelt on, grab an ice cold drink, and strap yourself in, and here we go, right? So no particular order, and I think I got about a dozen of these guys, but just want to kind of discuss them and just like really just talk about, it's amazing how many great guitar players some of these singers have worked with. We all long talk about those great singer-guitar player pairings, right? So, all right, I'm going to start off with my man David Coverdale from Whitesnake, also of Deep Purple. This guy has worked with some serious players in his career. Of course, starting off with Ritchie Blackmore, obviously in Deep Purple, right? Tommy Bolin, okay, in the last stage of Deep Purple in the 70s. All right, the Mark IV lineup, okay? Doesn't get much better than those two guys. But how about when he formed Whitesnake? Some great players in Whitesnake over the years. Early on, you had Bernie Marsden and Mickey Moody, a great tag team guitar duo right there. Very bluesy. All right. Mel Galley, ex of Trapeze, came in for the Slide It In album. All right. John Sykes, ex of Tigers of Pantang and Thin Lizzy at the time. John Sykes has become, went on to become a huge guitar hero, with Blue Murder and some solo stuff. He hasn't done anything in a million years, but still a guitar hero nonetheless. Adrian Vandenberg, okay. Coverdale plucked him right out of the Vandenberg band to join Whitesnake. Steve Vai, okay, who also had a good pedigree before he joined Whitesnake with Frank Zappa's band, okay, with Alcatraz. Vivian Campbell, never recorded with him, with Whitesnake, I should say, but did that major tour, the 87 album, did that tour. Of course, Vivian from the Dio band. Doug Aldrich, in more recent times, notable player. Reb Beach, still in the band to this day. Reb Beach has been with Whitesnake now for, a decade or more. All right. Reb also in Winger. Okay. And, of course, you got Joel Hoekstra, the most recent addition to the Coverdale camp. Joel, formerly of Night Ranger, also with the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Okay. So, Coverdale, a lot of great players have saddled up next to David. How about Ronnie James Dio? Okay. Again, you got the Blackmore connection. In fact, the first 3 guys on my list have that connection to Blackmore. Ronnie James Dio, of course, played with Blackmore and Rainbow. Ronnie James Dio has had Vivian Campbell in the Dio band, of course, the young stud. Vivian Campbell made his name in the rock and metal world with playing with Dio. Tony Iommi, all right, from Ronnie's time in Black Sabbath. Craig Goldie, also from the Dio band. Rowan Robertson. Doug Aldrich, again, he also spent time in Dio. Have a Tracy G, right? Some good players there. Ian Gillan. Of course, Ian Gillan from Deep Purple. So, of course, you got the Blackmore connection. Also the Steve Morse connection. Briefly, Joe Satriani, okay, did a tour with them. Never recorded with them. How about in the Ian Gillan band, you had Ray Fenwick, okay. from the Gillan band. Initially Steve Bird, but then how about Bernie Tormé? The late, great Bernie Tormé. Yannick Gers, now with Iron Maiden. Okay, and how about Ian Gillan solo? The very capable Steve Morris, not to be confused with Steve Morse from Deep Purple. Steve Morris, Morris, a very, very good player. Played on a bunch of those late 80s, early 90s Ian Gillan solo albums. Great, great player. Who else we got here? How about Ozzy Osbourne, right? Ozzy Solo's band has just been kind of like a stomping ground for up-and-coming guitar players. First of all, his mate in Black Sabbath, Tony Iommi, right? Randy Rhoads, Brad Gillis, Bernie Tormé briefly, who helped out after Randy Rhoads passed away before Brad Gillis joined the band. Jakey Lee came on board for a couple albums. Of course, Jakey went on to Badlands, okay, Red Dragon Cartel. Zakk Wylde, the great Zakk Wylde, okay, Black Label Society. Gus G, also with Firewind. Jerry Cantrell with Alice in Chains has also played with Ozzy on and off. Joe Holmes, I don't think Joe ever recorded an album with Ozzy, but he played a couple tours. Very capable player. More recently, you got Andrew Watt, okay, also from of California breed from New York City. How about, let's get a little more bluesy. How about Paul Rodgers, the late, great, not the late, sorry, Paul, the great, I meant to say, Paul Rodgers, okay, ex of Free, currently still of Bad Company. Paul Kossoff from Free, one of the late Paul Kossoff, one of the greatest guitar players, sporting a Gibson Les Paul, man, a gutsy player. Mick Ralphs, of course, ex from Bad Company. Also Mott the Hoople. Brian May, because Paul Rodgers spent some time in Queen. Brian May of Queen, of course. Jimmy Page, how about, Rodgers and Page played in the Firm together. Neil Schon, okay, did some bluesy stuff with Paul Rodgers on a bunch of different releases. Gary Moore also took part in some of that. Jeff Beck as well. David Gilmour, Slash, Buddy Guy, all those guys recorded with Paul Rodgers over the years and a lot of the more bluesy releases that he's put out. Glenn Hughes, probably one of the guys on, there's a couple guys on this list I'm going to talk about here who probably sound as good as they ever have today. He's definitely one of them, Paul Rodgers as well. Glenn has played with a ton of great players over the years. Mel Galley, of course, back in their trapeze days. Richie Blackmore from Deep Purple, as well as Tommy Bolin. Okay, he also did the album with Pat Thrall, ex of Pat Travers' band, the Hughes Thrall album. Great player. Tony Iommi, he spent some time in Black Sabbath, as well as some Tony Iommi solo stuff. He played on the Run for Cover album with Gary Moore. That is a partnership that I always wished would have gone farther, but of course that was during Glenn's real dark days. Okay, John Norum, he did that great Face the Truth album with John Norum. That is a blistering album. If you've never heard that, John Norum from Europe. Okay, they did that album together, Face the Truth, back in early 90s. Killer heavy rock album with some of Glenn's best vocals ever and John's best guitar playing ever. That is a must-hear album, for people, if you haven't heard it. Joe Bonamassa, of course. Joe and Glenn in Black Country Communion together. Doug Aldrich. Okay. They did. Doug played guitar for Glenn on some solo tours. Now they're in the Dead Daisies together. Okay. Andrew Watt, who we mentioned before. Okay. From California breed. And then how about some of the great solo players, or great players that Glenn has played with on his solo albums, like Soren Anderson, J.J. Marsh, okay, Jeff Coleman, the great Jeff Coleman. How about Dario Molo? Okay, those guys did a couple albums together. All right, what about Sammy Hagar? Not as big a list as some of these other guys, but pretty damn notable. I mean, Sammy has played. Sammy's a great guitar player in his own right, okay? But he's played with, sang for Ronnie Montrose in the Montrose Band. Eddie Van Halen, of course, in Van Halen. Joe Satriani, Chickenfoot. How about Neil Schon from Journey when they did the HSAS album together? That was damn good. Vic Johnson, okay, more recent years. And Gary Pill, okay, from a lot of Sammy solo stuff. Some pretty serious guitar shredders right there. Phil Mogg, my man Phil from UFO. Okay, he's also been very fortunate to play with some serious players, going way back to the early UFO days with Mick Bolton. Pretty damn good player, I think. Whether you like that early UFO kind of space rocky stuff or not, Mick was a pretty good player. Michael Schenker, of course. Okay, Paul Chapman, of course. How about Vinnie Moore? More recent UFO. Vinny's a fantastic player. Let's not forget Bernie Marsden, also from Whitesnake, who actually played in UFO for roughly about a year, okay, before Schenker joined. Did not record an album, but did many tours with them. Later 80s UFO, Atomic Tommy M. Okay, how about Lawrence Archer? Okay, who also played with Phil Lynott in Grand Slam. Very good player. Jeff Coleman. Okay, Jeff played with Phil and Pete Way in the Mogg Way stuff. Jeff's a fantastic player, like I mentioned before. All right, here's a guy who has played with probably, I think, more than anybody else on this list. Alice Cooper. Okay, God, you look at some of the guitar players that have played in the various Alice Cooper band lineups over the years. It's just ridiculous. Glenn Buxton from the original Alice Cooper group. I love his playing. May he rest in peace. Michael Bruce, fantastic rhythm guitar player. Steve Hunter and Dick Wagner, one of the best guitar duos of all time. All right, Davy Johnstone. Didn't play with Alice for too long. Did one album and a tour. Davy's also from Elton John's band. He's a great player. Okay, how about Bob and Bruce Kulick, both who have done some stuff with Alice. All right, Danny Johnson. Okay, great Danny Johnson. Also spent time with Derringer and Axis and Alcatraz. Kane Roberts. Beefed up muscular Kane Roberts with his machine gun guitar. Mike Pinera. John Nitzinger. Well, there's some great players here. Vinnie Moore also spent some time in Alice's band. Al Petrelli, Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, Orianthi, Reb Beach, Eric Drover, Damon Johnson, Ryan Roxy in some of the more recent years. Ryan Roxy, Phil X, Kerry Kelly, Tommy Henriksen, Nita Strauss. I mean, the list goes on and on. These are all folks who have, appeared on Alice's albums, done some live stuff, tours, things like that. I mean, such a great cast of characters there. I mean, Alice has been pretty lucky to really work with some fantastic guitar players. And let's mention Joe Perry, okay, and Joe Walsh, Hollywood Vampires, right? They've appeared on the Hollywood, a lot of even more guitar players on the Hollywood Vampires side. How about the late, great David Bowie? Okay, another guy who has worked with some exceptional players over the years. Mick Ronson, Tim Renwick, Carlos Alomar, very underrated player. Played on a lot of Bowie studio albums and done plenty of tours. Earl Slick, another one of those real underrated players, a fantastic guitarist. The great Robert Fripp from King Crimson. Adrian Belew, also from King Crimson, Frank Zappa. Stevie Ray Vaughan, right? That's where Stevie really got his first big push, playing on the Let's Dance album. Derek Bramble, Peter Frampton, Reeves Gabriels, Nile Rodgers. How about David Torn? A lot of people forget that David Torn, the great kind of jazz and avant-garde player, did lots of recording with Bowie later on in Bowie's career. Okay. Phil Lynott. Can't do a show like this without mentioning Phil. Okay. I mean, in between, well, mostly Thin Lizzy, but also in Grand Slam, Eric Bell, Brian Robertson, Gary Moore, Scott Gorham, John Sykes, Snowy White, Lawrence Archer. That is a cast right there. Some great, great players. Let's go over to the prog side. How about John Wetton? John Wetton, always one of my favorite vocalists and bass players from the progressive rock genre. And he has played with some serious musicians across all different instruments in his career. But as far as like the guitar players go, so let's go way back, all right? He played with a cat named James Litherland, ex of Coliseum, in a band called Mogul Thrash. Litherland is a serious player. Okay? How about Alan Holdsworth? They spent time together in UK, right? Robert Fripp, of course, in their King Crimson days. Mick Box. People forget that John Wetton played on a couple albums with Uriah Heep. All right, Steve Howe in Asia. How about Andy Powell and Laurie Weisfield? Okay, that's right. John Wetton spent some time in Wishbone Ash. Okay, how about John Whitney, very capable player from Family. Phil Manzanera from Roxy Music. All right, again, Wetton spent time in all these bands. How about Pat Thrall? Pat Thrall also played in Asia after Hal left back in the 80s. Al Pitrelli as well. Guthrie Govan as well. Okay. John's also done some recording with Peter Banks, the late, great Peter Banks from Yes and Flash, as well as Steve Hackett. Okay. John and Steve have recorded lots of stuff together on many of their solo albums. Let's go to the metal side of things. A guy who has been well-traveled since he burst on the scene in the 90s. And, he doesn't stick around anywhere too long, but he's played with some serious metal guitar players. I'm talking about Tim Ripper Owens, the guy who's in Priest, right? He replaced Rob Halford in Priest, so he's played with K.K. Downing and Glenn Tipton. He was in Iced Earth, so he got to play with John Schaefer and all the various lead guitar players who have gone in and out of Iced Earth in that couple-year run. He played with Yngwie Malmsteen for a couple albums and tours, with Chris Caffrey. Okay, he's done some work with Chris Caffrey. All right. Chris Caffrey, of course, ex of Savatage. Well, I guess you could say still with Savatage because they never officially broke up. And Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Okay, the Spirits of Fire Band. Okay. Jason Sukoff. Charred Walls of the Damned. Andrea does some projects with Andreas Kisser from Sepultura. He's worked with Kerry Kelly and Craig Goldie, okay, and the Dio's Disciples stuff. So Mr. Owens has also played with some serious metal shredders, and I'm sure that list is going to even grow because he's just always busy doing something. How about Jeff Scott Soto? Got his start in Yngwie Malmsteen's Rising Force. He's played with Neil Schon. He's played with Axel Rudy Pell. He's played with, of course, he's playing right now with Ron Bumblefoot Thal and the Great Sons of Apollo band. Okay, he's played with Joel Hoekstra. Of course, they do the Trans-Siberian Orchestra thing together. He's played with Alex Massey, the great guitarist Alex Massey. He's played with Michael Schenker. He's done some work with Gus G., Neil Grusky, Frederick Atkinson from Opeth. Okay. A lot of really notable players there. Another guy, and this is the last one on my list for today, who has unbelievably just done stuff with so many fantastic guitarists. Graham Bonnet. Okay. Played in Rainbow with Ritchie Blackmore. MSG with Michael Schenker. Okay, he was in the Chris Impellitteri band. Yngwie Malmsteen, okay, with Alcatraz. He had Steve Vai playing for him in Alcatraz. Bob Kulick, okay. Danny Johnson. Ray Fenwick. He's played with Slash. He's played with Vivian Campbell, Dario Molo, Joey Tafola, Jan Ackerman, Mickey Moody, and Bernie Marsden, Conrado Pesinato, Kurt James, Joe Stump. The list goes on. I'm sure I'm missing some. I mean, Graham Bonnet has done stuff with so many different players. I mentioned the Bob Kulick thing. They played in that Blackthorn project briefly in the late 80s, early 90s. Heavy stuff. So, here you have a whole bunch of singers who have been well-traveled in their careers and have managed to saddle up next to so many virtuoso guitar players. Okay, and again, I didn't mention all of them. There's some of these guys have played with additional guys, maybe not as many household names, but it's just, and if I forgot some, hey, can't mention all of them. But, curious to see, I'm sure there's other singers who have played with a bunch of good guitar players. I didn't mention, I'll mention them now, Greg Allman. Okay, but Greg's played with Dickie Betts and his brother Dwayne, and Warren Haynes and Derek Trucks and all the other guitar players that have been in and out of the Allman Brothers over the years. That's another one right there. So there's so many of them. You can mention Mick Jagger too. Mick's played with a lot of great players in his solo career as well as with the Stones. So let's see if you guys got some other ones, right? So if you do have some other notable singers who have played with a plethora, a large amount of virtuoso, very notable guitar players, list them below, okay? Let's get the dialogue going here. Let's get the conversation going. That's what this is meant to be like, just kind of sitting around in a bar, at a concert, out to dinner, right? Just kind of talking music and talking about vocalists and all the cool guitar players they played with, and that's what this kind of show is all about, right? It's just a conversation. So visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. That's our slogan. We're on YouTube all the damn time. So make sure, if you haven't watched them and you haven't voted, okay, check out round 5 of Classic Live Album War. We've got the 4 matchups going right now. Okay, there's 8 contestants. Some interesting scenarios happening both on the Facebook page and on here on YouTube. All right, the one, I'll get it out in the open right now. I'm actually shocked that Rush is like kind of destroying the Allman Brothers Band at the Fillmore. I never expected that. Exit Stage Left is actually well in the lead on both Facebook and here on YouTube over the Allman Brothers Band at the Fillmore East. I did not expect that. Most of the other matchups, I think, are kind of going the direction some of us expected, which, they're tough choices, but, there's certain live albums that are just kind of held a little higher than others, and it is what it is. But I did not expect Rush to be performing so well. Nothing against Exit Stage Left, because I absolutely love it, but, most people think of At Fillmore East as kind of like the Holy Grail, and so far right now there's still today and tomorrow to vote, so it's we've got some time, but and Thursday morning. But did not expect that at all. So if you haven't voted, please go to our page here. Go to the Classic Album War playlist and make sure you go watch those 4 videos and vote for your favorite. Go to our Facebook page and do the same thing. We got other cool stuff coming up. So I have my list ready. So for when the tournament is over, I'm going to give you my top 25 favorite live albums of all time. You may ask, why did I pick 25? Because I wanted to do a top 20, and there were just certain ones that I absolutely just could not live with not including and talking about, so I did a 25. I could have done a 50, but I figured 25 is a good number. Got that coming up. I also have my top albums of the decade coming up. Okay, so 2010 through 2019. I have a video that I'm going to be doing for that, where I'm not going to put them in any order. I'm just going to list off my favorite albums of the decade. Okay, ones that if you missed, you should be seeking out, as well as we're going to be at Rock Fantasy this Sunday with a whole cast of characters doing our favorite releases of 2019, our top 10s of 2019, and then I will do a separate video on, like I do every year on Christmas Eve, of my top 30 of the year. Okay, so we'll be doing that as well, so do not miss it. All right, guys, so we'll see you real soon. Take care.